We've already heard from Global Insight automotive analyst Christoph Stuermer in David Tweed's hit just before the break, and I'm pleased to say that he joins me now live from Frankfurt. Christoph, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Now, we've talked a lot about cars over the last couple of weeks and months because there's a clear dichotomy between the ones that are doing well, it's the high-end luxury cars, and the ones that are struggling a little bit because of all this economic crisis. Is it as simple as that?
Well, it's not the crisis as such, but it is the effect on consumer spending that some of the volume manufacturers are feeling, especially when they're exposed to economic areas that suffer from slow growth, such as wider Europe, for example. Then these companies have a problem growing.
And so in terms of the car makers that you like the most, we're just talking about Porsche a little bit before the break. Is this a company that can still grow despite all the headwinds that we're seeing in Europe, because it continues exporting, because it's such a desirable brand? At the end of the day, if people want a brand, a specific brand, they will pay for it.
Absolutely, and Porsche really is a mouse with a lion's roar. Their annual sales are 100,000 units. That's less than any average American sedan is selling. So there is ample growth, ample room for growth for them, only they need to tap into the markets of affluent people, people that have a high affinity to actually spending their money on prestige cars or very fast cars that in most parts of the world they can't drive anyways.
And what's the difference between a Porsche and a BMW? Because these are both luxury end, but of course they're catering for a very different customer.
Well, not really. It's only that Porsche has a much smaller portfolio. Porsche is about 100,000 units. BMW is about 1.5 million units. So there is a huge difference in scale. But when you compare them like for like in the area of high-end sports cars, they're not so far apart. So it's about developing the brand.
I thought Porsche was actually a stronger brand in terms of one of the most recognizable brands, that Porsche was a little bit closer to the really high-end, such as the Ferraris and car companies like that.
Sure, but there are very expensive BMWs as well. And when you compare them like for like in the same kind of price area, their sales aren't that much different. Only Porsche lacks more affordable cars, and that's part of their strategy to grow.
And Christoph, very quickly, how difficult is it going to be for the Toyotas and the luxury car makers to continue growing in this kind of environment, where, as you rightly said, a lot of consumers are very careful on how they spend their money?
Well, the kind of people who actually buy luxury cars are people who are entrepreneurs, who live on big salaries, who live on big bonuses. So they're much more closer aligned to the investment cycle rather than the consumer cycle. Toyota, however, is a typical consumer brand, so it relies much more on consumer spending and actual purchasing power on the consumer level.
All right, Christoph, thank you so much. Christoph Stuermer there now.